We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm starting a little bit late because yesterday everybody showed up about 10 minutes late, so we have a good crowd here, and we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Joe Higgins, and I know that most of you in the audience probably know me from the other work that I've done here over the last couple of years. Today I'm going to be talking to you about healthy teams beating chronic diseases in America, and how important that is to you, your teams, your children, your grandkids, your families, and one of the big problems we're having in America today, of course, is this issue around disease in America. I'll tell you that this is kind of a historic moment, really, at BrandSource and in buying groups in general. You know, I've been around a long time, and I've done this for many, many years. I've never been to a buy group meeting before, where the group was actually interested in helping the health of its members. So that's just a great thing, and in today's world, maybe more important than anything we've ever done. I know that for my career, I'd always come into a room and something like this, where there'd be dealers sitting in the room, and I would offer, $10 on a washer, or $15 on a dryer, or $50 on a refrigerator. In today's world, I get to come in here and say, I'm going to be presenting something that could save your life, that could keep you disability-free for many, many years to come. So it's a great message, and I'm really proud to be able to do this for people anywhere I speak. So today, healthy teams beating chronic diseases in America. Let me start with a simple idea. That in this country, we do a lot of things to protect ourselves from homicide. I mean, we put deadbolt locks on our doors so people can't get in. We have dogs that run around our houses that bark at people. I have 2 dogs that bark if somebody comes to the doors. We have alarm systems. We have lights that go on and off all night long if we're concerned. Some people sleep with a loaded gun on their dresser, just in case somebody breaks in. I've had a baseball bat under my bed for 40 years. Yeah, right. We do it, right? Never use it. I live in a town where there's been 1 homicide in 25 years, and yet I do all those things to protect myself. Prevention, right? We think the worst thing that could happen is somebody breaks in, and then the cause of that and the consequence of that could be severe, so we try to prevent it. I also know that ABC, NBC, CBS, they cover homicide every day on the news. There's a segment 20, 30 minutes long where they cover homicide. And yet if you look at the numbers, it's pretty interesting that homicide there, you'll see, is about 5th from the bottom. 15,000 people a year die from homicide. And 2 million people a year die from chronic diseases. Let me put it a different way for you. 5,500 people every day in this country die from chronic diseases. Most of them don't have to. If I put it a different way, 20 jumbo jets would crash every single day with numbers like that at some airport in America. None of you would get on a plane to fly up here if that happened. None of you would. You'd be scared to death. And yet the real killer in America is something that we rarely think about. We really take efforts to try to prevent, try to save ourselves from these chronic diseases that are killing us, our teams, and in many ways even our children. Experts predict that if we don't make drastic changes, that 1 out of every 3 Americans will have adult-onset diabetes in 20 years. Now, I have to be honest with this group here. I changed the wording in this to fit what I wanted to do here. Okay? I took the word type 2 out where it says adult onset, and I replaced it with adult onset. Anybody here have any idea why I might have done that? Close. The reason why I did it is in today's world, it's not just adults who are getting it. It's actually children. And surprisingly enough, and this should concern all of you because I know probably most of you have children in here, but the number of kids that were diagnosed with type 2 diabetes in 1977 were 0. And in 2010, that number now is 60,000. There was an article in Time magazine recently about a young girl, and the title of the article was Young Kids, Old Bodies. This is a 13-year-old girl that has a body of a 45-year-old. She has atherosclerosis, hardening of the arteries. She has type 2 diabetes. She has kidney disease. She sees 5 different doctors, and she's 13 years old. This is what's happening in America today. Our children are getting sick in ways that we've never seen before. That's why I called it. That's why I did that, to represent for you what's happening beyond what you do. You're all leaders in your organizations, in your world. And what you do and the actions you take affect not only your teams, but your children, your grandchildren, and everybody else around you. Experts predict in 20 years, 95% of Americans will either be overweight or obese. That's pretty significant. The current generation of American children will be the first to have a shorter lifespan than those of their parents. Now, again, You're probably all parents in here. Nobody wants the worst for their children, and yet that's what we're facing as we move forward with these chronic diseases. We've estimated that approximately 150,000 lives could be saved in America each year, mostly from stroke and heart disease, if we could cut sodium by 50% in restaurant and processed foods. Now, that's 10 times more than die from homicide. And yet, what do we do about this? There is no action being taken today to save us. There's no prevention being done to save us from stroke and heart disease based on the amount of sodium that we get. In survey of kids 12 years old and younger, 78% could not identify kale, cabbage, broccoli, or any type of squash. And yet 98% knew what chicken nuggets were. Now, I asked this group here, because I don't know, can you tell me what part of the chicken are nuggets? Can anybody tell me where the nuggets come from? Every part. That's a great answer. Actually, what I read is they scrape all the stuff off the rendering floor. They put it in that pink slime. They create nuggets. And those guys that work at McDonald's that create the food taste, they make it taste so good that we can't stop eating them. That's what's sad about it. There's your kids again. And then this one. This is the hard part, because for every one impression I give you today, for every one, you get 17 from fast food outlets. 17. They spend $1 billion a year on advertising targeted at your kids. If you drive down the average street in America, there are 20 fast food restaurants hearkening for you to come in and eat their food. I have no chance. You have no chance as parents. This is why this is so critical and why this is so important. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not just an issue. This is not just a small problem. This is a catastrophe that's happening in America. This is a disaster. And if we don't begin to make changes today, it'll overrun us in our healthcare system as well. Okay, so what's today's presentation about? Well, I'm here to give you cutting-edge research. You're going to get some of that. You're going to see things that maybe just happened in the last 2 years or less. I'm going to talk about education, not fear. I'm not here to scare you, although these diseases will do that, unfortunately. I want to raise awareness of chronic diseases. I'm going to give you a look at populations, which is kind of interesting, I thought, and really what it means to you and your teams. And my goal today is this. I'm not here to try to change your lifestyle, ask you to do anything different. My goal today is to have you go get tested with the biometric screening that's being done in the Verona room. That's really what I'm going to try to do today, and hopefully you guys will think about that. I'm going to look at websites from the CDC, the American Medical Association. You can read those. I want you to know that this is the latest research on these sites, the best science, and you're going to get, in 1 hour, you're going to get what takes me 6 months of research. And when you leave here, I think you're going to be you're going to have a pretty good idea about diseases in America. Okay, so this is what I'm covering today. High blood pressure, diabetes, stroke, heart disease, and cancer. Again, you'll see some videos here. Let me start, though, with this idea, because I think this is really important, that in America, when we think about success, we think about success in 3 ways. How much money we have, the type of job or business we own and how successful we are, and how well we do with our kids. And I want, for the next hour, if you will, just follow me. I would like you to take another idea about success to the very top rung of that ladder, and I want it to be health. Because if I say this line to you, if we don't have our health, we don't have what? Anything. Do we believe that in here? Judy, I know, Judy Lawrence is here. Judy, you believe that, right? Judy, with what Judy's been through in the last 2 years, she told me the other night that this is a really important subject. She's been through hell, right? And back. And she's a great example of what I'm talking about here. A new success for America. Health, number 1 on the ladder, and then we'll do that for the next hour, and we'll see where it takes us. Okay, 2 very important points. That what causes a disease promotes a disease. What causes a disease, if you keep doing what causes a disease, it'll continue to promote the disease. My brother had a very serious lung condition. He couldn't walk across the room without breathing heavy. He couldn't go up a flight of stairs. He couldn't enjoy his family. The doctors kept giving him advice, and he wouldn't do anything. And then one day, he decided to give up smoking. And in 3 weeks, he was better. What causes a disease promotes a disease. And the second thing, prevention versus repair. In America, what we do is we say, go out and live your life however you want. Do it anything you want. And when you get sick, come to the doctor, and I'll give you a pill or I'll give you surgery. That's great. It's way better in the longer term to practice prevention like we do with homicide. We would be a whole lot better off. Okay, now this is a look at population studies. Can a person who's 60 compete with one who's 30? Because in this country, we believe, I think, sometimes that when you're 60 years old, it's time for the easy chair. It's time to settle down and not do anything anymore. Let me tell you about a Honolulu marathon that I ran in 1979, 35 years ago. I got to this race. It's a great race. It starts at 5 o'clock in the morning, runs down Waikiki around Diamond Head, and ends in a park called Kapiolani Park. If you've ever been to Waikiki, you know where this park is. And during the race, I was running my 10th marathon, and during the race, I noticed that there was a lot of elderly Japanese, but very few younger Japanese, and it didn't make sense to me because you don't normally see that. And I'm a good starter and a slow finisher, and about mile 18, a Japanese man ran past me with a green hat that said the University of Hawaii Manoa on it. And I recognized that hat because I used to run on that campus when I'd go to Hawaii. Well, he ran past me. I thought he was maybe 45 years old. I figured he was, more than 15 years older than me. And I was mad because he passed me. And then 2 more gentlemen passed me around the same time. And then a third passed me a little bit later, about mile 22. Well, at the end of the race, we were all sitting in the park and we were listening to the awards ceremony. And here's this guy in the green hat sitting about 10 yards from where I'm sitting. And they get to the age groups and they get to the 60-year-olds and they say, Pete Nakamura. And this guy in the green hat jumps up, runs to the stage, runs up the stairs, and gets his medal. He was 60 years old. He passed me at mile 18. He was double my age. He finished 20 minutes faster than I did. I was shocked. And then, to make matters worse, the next 2 finishers in this 60 group both finished faster than I did. Well, that was pretty tough. But then they got to the 65-year-olds. He finished 2 minutes ahead of me as well. Can a person who's 60 compete with one who's 30? Yes. And it happens around the world. And research that we look at today says that. We see populations where people actually do compete with people half their age. At 60 years old, in many populations, you're not even old. Let me show you a video. And let me just say, I kept in touch with Pete for a number of years. We became friends. I walked over to him that day at the marathon, and I said, I can't understand this. How can you do this? And he said, well, we've taken care of ourselves. We're from Okinawa. We live the ancestral ways. I said, what about the kids? Why aren't there any kids, Japanese kids, in this race? And he said, well, when they come to America and they adopt the American lifestyle, they have the same level of death and disease that Americans do. It's not genetic. It's lifestyle. And so there's a doctor on this next video that wanted to take a look at long life and people who live long and disability-free lives. And he found 3 places in the world that were the longest on the planet. One was northern Sardinia, where they live into their 90s, typically healthy, all the way into their hundreds even. The other one was Okinawa, where Pete was from, where they actually have the longest lived lives in the world. And the third one was Loma Linda, California. Judy, you recognize that city. Where I live, 30 miles from where I live, Loma Linda, California, he found people that live late in life and disability-free. And I want you to see this video, and I'll tell you about it when it's done.
This is a culture that has healed Ellsworth Wareham. Ellsworth Wareham is 97 years old. He's a multi-millionaire. Yet when a contractor wanted $6,000 to build a privacy fence, he said, for that kind of money, I'll do it myself. So for the next 3 days, he was out shoveling cement and hauling poles around. And predictably, perhaps, on the 4th day, he ended up in the operating room. But not as the guy on the table, the guy doing open heart surgery. At 97, he still does 20 open heart surgeries every month. Ed Rawlings, 103 years old now, an active cowboy, starts his morning with the swim, and on the weekends he likes to put on the boards, throw up rooster tails. And then Marge DeTon. Marge is 104. Her grandson actually lives in the Twin Cities here. She starts her day with lifting weights. She rides her bicycle, and then she gets in a root beer-colored 1994 Cadillac Seville and tears down the San Bernardino Freeway, where she still volunteers for 7 different organizations.
So Loma Linda, California, a group of Seventh-day Adventists who believe that community is really important. They have a community. They get a lot of support that way. They do a lot of exercise. He talks about moving naturally in this video. About how people move naturally and they have better health that way. And then the third thing is they have a plant-based diet, because Seventh-day Adventists are vegetarians, as an example. Okay, so today we're going to start with high blood pressure. Those numbers up there actually represent something, kind of an interesting look. 77.9 million, that's the number of people today in America that have high blood pressure. 77.9 million. 343,000 are the number of people that die from complications of high blood pressure every year. 120 over 80 is kind of normal. Anything below that is good. Between 120 and 140 is pre-hypertension, and above that is hypertension. If you're diagnosed with hypertension at that level, ladies and gentlemen, you have a serious disease. A serious disease, and you need to get it checked, and I'll talk about that. 4,200, let me go back, 4,200 and 1,500. 4,200 is the average amount of salt that Americans get in their daily diet. 1,500 is the maximum you should get in any given day. I'll tell you why that's important too in a second here. Okay, hypertension, a disease of excess salt. It does damage to the inner walls of your arteries. It actually causes atherosclerosis, and I have a physiology slide on that. It also causes kidney failure. Now understand why this is so important. As you age, you lose capacity in your kidneys. Every single year you lose capacity. But high blood pressure damages the very delicate capillaries in the kidneys. And so you lose even more capacity. Now you've seen stories on television before where like people get food poisoning, for example. And you always hear the story about how older people die from it, but younger people don't. Why is that? Because as you get older, and if high blood pressure has damaged your kidneys, you have less available space to protect yourself. That's why that happens. So this is why this is an important disease to make sure you're taking care of yourself with. Hemorrhagic and ischemic strokes, I'll talk about that separately, but high blood pressure is implicated very strongly in strokes. And then brain disease, and this is some of the most interesting and most latest research, because we've wondered about Alzheimer's for many, many years. This is a disease in America that many years ago, I remember when I was a kid, hardly anybody you ever heard of had Alzheimer's or brain wasting diseases in America. And yet today it's rampant. My mother died from Alzheimer's. And they say today that 1 out of 4 people in America will get some form of brain wasting disease when they're 65 until they die. Very serious. If you have a diastolic above 80, your chances of dying of heart disease more than doubles. Okay. So this is the part of the presentation where I talk about what my friends call Higgins vision, if you will. Okay, so I don't like to talk about the physiology until after I explain what the disease is. This is what high blood pressure is. It's a disease that you don't know you have. Imagine yourself if you're out in front of your house and you're watering some flowers and there's a wall in front of you. And the water's coming out of the hose in a normal manner and you're watering your flowers and you see the wall and you think, there's some dirt on that wall and I want to clean it off. So you're holding the hose. How do you raise the pressure on the hose? You put your thumb over it, right? And that raises the pressure. So now you raise the pressure and you squirt that wall and some of the dirt comes off, right, Steve? Not all the water comes off, all the dirt comes off when you hit it, right? So you call a painter out. Now a painter brings a machine called a high pressure machine. I didn't know this before. I said, I want you to paint my wall. He said, let me hit it with a high pressure machine first, and he takes the high pressure machine, hooks it up, and now he really hits that wall and everything comes off. As a matter of fact, that wall got so clean, we didn't need to paint it. Amazing. But in my mind, the way my mind works, and I'm thinking about disease in America, I'm thinking, what if that machine ran 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? How long do we think it would take that wall to disappear? I have no idea. A year? 5 years? 10 years? Who knows? But at some point, that water will destroy that wall. And that's what high blood pressure is. And how does it look in your body? So high blood pressure works on what we call the endothelium. You see it right here. It's the inner layer of the artery wall. And what happens under high blood pressure, the same way that hose works on that wall, is it hits that endothelium and chips away that outer layer. And eventually that artery gets sick and weak, it gets rigid and narrow, and now high blood pressure goes up, down in the system. And it makes that artery so weak that if you, for example, a friend of mine happened, if he leaned over and when he stood up, the artery broke. You can't break a healthy artery. You can do as much exercise as you want under all kinds of pressure, and it won't break that artery if it's healthy. But if it's weak, it'll break in a second. And it also gets inflamed, and when it gets inflamed, it attracts cholesterol and then plaque. And then what happens then is what you see here, where it builds up, and now it gets even narrower, just like we narrowed with our thumb the opening on the hose, and now blood pressure increases in the system, and now you have a serious problem. This is serious disease. And every single day, if you have high blood pressure and you don't know it, every single day, this is what's going on in your body. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the trouble with it is if you don't get it checked and don't know you have it, eventually you can't reverse this. It's too late. It damages all parts of your body and it's too late. And it's implicated in all kinds of diseases as well. That's high blood pressure. And that's my look at high blood pressure. So look at these numbers. If you're concerned about high blood pressure, this is what it does. 69% of people who have a first heart attack, 77% who have a first stroke, and 74% who have congestive heart failure have blood pressure higher than 140/90. That's why this is so important. If I told you you had a 70% greater chance of winning the lottery today if you went and stood in line to do it, would you do it? Well, of course we would. Why not? And yet we have these multi-million-dollar bodies that if you had $100 million in the bank and someone said you're going to die from this, would you spend that to do it? Of course you would. That's the effect of high blood pressure. A high-salt diet raises the risk of high blood pressure by 68%. You know, there are restaurants in this country where you can go in and you can have a meal that you can get 9,000 milligrams of sodium in one meal. 1,500 is what you should get per day. One meal can give you 9,000. I said this yesterday, and somebody said, well, that's my favorite restaurant, the Cheesecake Factory. They have something on the menu that has 9,000 milligrams. Have you ever woken up in the morning and you can't get your ring off after a high-salt meal? You know what that feels like, where you can hardly close your hands and stuff? That's the consequence of high blood pressure. Okay, so what happens when you go to the doctor? Well, the doctor looks at you and says, well, you have high blood pressure. Here, take this pill, typically. We find in research that 73% of doctors don't explain this to their patients. They don't have time, and when patients are in the hospital or in the doctor's office, they don't hear anything anyway. They don't hear it. So they don't tell them. So here's a pill. This is typical of what we get when we take pills. Have you ever seen these articles in magazines that have 4 pages of warnings? 4 pages where it tells you why you shouldn't take these pills and the problems. Have you seen this? Hey, don't take this pill because don't take it. These are the warnings. These are the side effects. So Durell. Now, there's a lot of pills for high blood pressure. There's beta blockers, which that affect the adrenaline on the heart, which actually slows down the pump. But there's this one. I want to talk about this. I don't have time to talk about one in this presentation, but every single disease has a pill or 40 pills. Let's talk about this one. So high blood pressure is caused when you take a lot of salt and you retain a lot of water. But what this pill does is it gets rid of the water and gets rid of the salt. Perfect, right? So we can eat as much salt as we want. We just take the pill and it eliminates for us. But high blood pressure is a disease you don't know you have until you take a pill. Because when now you take a pill, you have digestive disorders, you feel it in your stomach, or you have anxiety or vision problems. And now you know you have it. And so compliance to a pill is low. So lifestyle can change it. I've seen people in my career and some of the work I've done with my staff at Whirlpool, I've seen people who have made changes, who have dropped their blood pressure within 3 days. And there is work that's been done for the last 40 years that say you can do that. Now, if you have high blood pressure and you don't do a lifestyle change, you need to take the pill. And I'm not here to give you advice. You need to get tested, see your doctor, and talk to them. But this is the effect of it, and this is something to think about for you as we raise the education of what high blood pressure is. Okay, let's talk about diabetes. Now, if I scared you with high blood pressure, this is worse. This is, of all the diseases I know of, this is the ugliest. And what I don't understand is why people don't react to diabetes like they do to other diseases. Now, if you've ever had a cancer scare, and again, Judy and I talked about this. We know what a cancer scare is like. When a doctor comes in and tells you you potentially have cancer, it is like the worst thing that can happen to you. I had a shoulder injury from a sport, racquetball. I play racquetball. I had a shoulder injury. And the doctor said, we need to test you for cancer because we saw something on the MRI we want to see. I had to go 3 times to get blood tests, and it came out I was okay. Obviously no cancer, and no worries, and I really wasn't worried about it anyway. But when he told me that, I couldn't stop thinking about it for days. And yet when people get high blood or get diabetes, they don't worry about it. I'm going to show you why this is just as dangerous, and maybe more so than cancer even. 231,000, that's a number of people that die every year from diabetes. 29 million people in this country are diagnosed with diabetes, and 86 million, just 2 weeks ago, I saw this on the news, 86 million are estimated to have prediabetes. If you have prediabetes, you have a 70% greater chance of getting diabetes in this country. 440, that's the amount of sugar that we get every day, on average, in America. We should get less than 100, 4 times as much as we should take in. And again, one of the culprits, Cheesecake Factory. Okay. Diabetes. Adult onset diabetes, now called type 2, is the fastest growing disease in America. Last year up 138%. And here's what it looks like. Blood sugar, 100 and higher, you have prediabetes. You are sick if you are at that level. Higher than 120, you have full-blown diabetes. But the great news is you can fix this literally in some cases overnight by a change of your diet. You can also take glucopage. Let me give you Higgins vision again, okay? Because diabetes is a difficult one to explain, but Higgins vision makes it easy. Imagine you live up in Alaska, and the mosquitoes up there are as big as little hummingbirds, right? If anybody's ever been up there, you know that. And they'll attack you as soon as you go outside, and they're very dangerous. Imagine you're in your house, and there's all these mosquitoes flying around, and for some inexplicable reason, you decide to open the door to your house. And you do, and the mosquitoes fly in, and they fly against the wall. And you go, oh my gosh, I got to get those mosquitoes, because if I don't, and I got to get all of them, because if I don't, they'll attack me, and they could kill me. So you spend the next hour killing those mosquitoes. Well, you sit down, you relax a little bit, then you decide to open your door again for some reason. You open the door, and they fly in again. And you do the same thing. And you do it 5 times that morning. And at one point, you can't get all the mosquitoes. And now you know you're in trouble because those mosquitoes are going to attack you, going to make you sick, or they're going to kill you. Well, that's what diabetes is. We eat a lot of foods that cause sugar to convert to glucose. In the normal process, the pancreas releases insulin that goes after that glucose. And in a normal situation, it absorbs it into the blood cells, into the fat cells, and into your muscles, and provides energy for you. But there's a point where if you get too much of glucose in your system, it goes through your system and it damages every single part of your body from head to toe, from your brain to your feet. This is how damaging this disease is. And this is what it looks like. This is very complicated, but in a normal process, glucose gets converted to, sugar gets converted to glucose. The insulin goes out and gets it, stores it, and you're fine. But when you get too much glucose in your system, you see it stays in the blood, and it moves through your bloodstream, and it attacks different parts of your body. Now understand that some things convert faster than others. For example, liquid, what we call liquid candy. Sugar in liquid form. It gets absorbed 30 times faster in your system, so it overloads your system with glucose. And there is no way the pancreas can get it all taken care of at that point. It's like opening the door and bringing the mosquitoes in by 30 times more than you normally would. And people do this voluntarily every day. Like I said, it's like opening the door. Why would you open the door? Why would you take in so much sugar and processed foods and white flour to have this happen to your body every single day? Let's take a look. Sure.
What does triglycerides, having an overabundance of triglycerides, do, or does it have anything to do with diabetes?
It does, and I'll answer it, but I think I'm going to answer that in the section on heart disease. But I'll do that here in just 1 second. So my wife's sister gets diagnosed with diabetes at 33 years old. This is her normal morning, procedure, right? She gets up at 6 o'clock. She goes into her kitchen. She gets these bran muffins from Dunkin' Donuts. Now, bran muffins must be healthy because they say bran in them, right? So she eats a Dunkin' bran muffin, 40 grams of sugar, not to talk about the 55 grams of fat that are in it. She has a glass of juice, 32 grams of sugar, which she thinks is healthy. Her blood sugar spikes and comes back down, and by 7 o'clock when she leaves the house, she's starving. She gets to work, and there's a Starbucks right next door. So she goes over and gets a 16-ounce flavored latte with 35 grams of sugar. Now, coffee is associated with a lower risk of diabetes. If you have 2 or 3 cups of coffee a day, you reduce your diabetes risk by 28%. And yet this one raises the risk, right? Because it's got so much sugar in it. So then her blood sugar spikes, comes back down, and by 9:30 on her break, she goes into the cafeteria. And she gets a white bread bagel, which she thinks is healthy because it's a bagel, right? And she puts cream cheese on it, which has fat in it, and has triglycerides, which in effect makes the insulin ineffective. That's where that answer comes, Judy, at that point. And then she has a Gatorade, because Gatorade has to be healthy, right? You see it on television. You see lean athletes drinking Gatorade. It's got to be healthy. 31 grams of sugar in the Gatorade. Now, I'll tell you this about Gatorade, that if you do the Ironman triathlon in Hawaii where it's 95 degrees, and you run a marathon and you ride 26 miles on your bike and you do 2.5-mile swim, then Gatorade's fine. But if you go out and play a set of tennis on a Sunday afternoon or Sunday evening, Gatorade's got too much sugar in it. It actually slows the absorption of water in your system. It actually reduces your performance. She thought it was healthy. She gets 144 grams of sugar a day. Her max is 26. This is all before noon, and she gets 749 calories from sugar. Her daily max is 100. This is somebody who is really sick, full-blown diabetes. So she comes to my wife, her sister, and she knows I do this kind of work, and she says, what can I do? The doctor wants me to take Leukopoge. Okay. So we give her some recommendations. We look at this, and I am shocked when I see this number here. And we give her some recommendations. In 3 months, she goes back to the doctor, and her diabetes is normal. It's 100. It's below 100, actually. 99 is what she told us. So what does she do? She thinks she's cured. She goes back to her old habits. 2 years later, she goes to the doctor again. She's diagnosed with full-blown diabetes. It's too much trouble for her, so she takes a pill. And what causes the disease promotes the disease. The pill doesn't fix her. It just reduces the effect of sugar in her system. That's diabetes, and that's how we handle it in America. Now, I said this was the ugliest of all diseases. Well, here's what it does. This is the effect of diabetes. This is why I say, when you get a diagnosis for diabetes, you should have the same reaction you have with cancer. This disease will kill you, and if it won't kill you, it'll make you disabled for many, many years of your life. Look at these. Coronary artery disease, this is atherosclerosis. That'll kill you. Chest pain, heart attack, stroke, narrowing of the arteries, nerve damage, kidney damage. I talked about kidneys. This also reduces your kidney function. Eye damage, foot damage, skin and mouth conditions, osteoporosis, bone disease. Dementia, cancer, and inflammation. Wow, it does it all. This is the worst of all the diseases, I think, in my mind. When I see it, I think, oh my gosh, I hope I never get diabetes. And I do everything I can to prevent it. Okay. In 2012, there were 66,000 non-traumatic limb amputations in America with people with diabetes. No small number. And let me say this, I felt really good yesterday because in one of the meetings, somebody raised their hand and said, as a result of what you said yesterday, I had water for lunch today. That made me feel really good. There's a strong correlation between what we call liquid candy, which is anything with sugar in it that we drink. And I told you before that the reason why is that, well, two reasons. It absorbs 30 times faster, number one. And number two, when you drink your liquid sugar, you replace it later on with some kind of solid food. So let me just make this recommendation. And this is a terrible recommendation. But if you have to drink liquid sugar, you're better off to eat it in a solid form. Now, I'm not recommending that, but I'm just saying, if the alternative is to eat a Snickers or to drink a Coke, then eat the Snickers. I'll also tell you that the sugar industry, they were very smart. If you look at the side of a can of Coke, if anybody has one in here, you could do this. If you look at the side of a can of Coke, the amount of calories in one can of Coke is about 130. The daily max is 100. So one can of Coke is more than your daily max. But on a Coke can, it doesn't. The sugar industry lobbied the government, and they prevented them from putting the amount that you should get in any certain day. So all it does is show the amount of calories, not the daily percentage value that represents. Because then you'd realize that one Coke is all you can drink because that's your daily amount that you should drink. That's the trouble with our industry today, this industry today. Okay, well, let me go back. I didn't finish that one. It would appear that the prevalence of consuming so much of our liquid in the form of soft drinks, juice, has raised the risk of contracting diabetes by 43%. Would you stand in line to win a lottery ticket for $10 million if it raised your chances by 43%? Many of us probably would. Okay, now this is another interesting one for children. And I had somebody come up to me yesterday and confirm this. A diet high in added sugar reduces the production of BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor, a brain chemical that, if not present, impairs the ability of the brain to form memories and hinders our ability to learn. I had a guy come up to me yesterday and said, I took my kids off of sugar. They had all these various learning disabilities. And he said, they are better in school today than they've ever been, and we got rid of all the pills they were taking. This was out 6 months ago, this research. This is the latest research I've seen on this, and that's what it said. So something to think about for your children, for your teams, for anybody that is part of your life. Okay, that's diabetes. Let's talk about stroke. You see the numbers again. You probably figured out what these were. Stroke kills 160,000 people in America, 10 times more than homicide. What are we doing to prevent stroke? What are we doing to prevent stroke? 800,000 people have what we call mini strokes in this country. Mini strokes are where the blood gets through, but can be blocked for a few seconds or more. Doesn't create a full-on stroke, but it does hit that area of the brain where we form memories. And that's where they think today, and again, this is research in the last year or so, they think that this is where the dementia, and this is where the brain disease, and this is where the Alzheimer's is coming from, is what's happening here with our brains with stroke. Where does stroke come from? 80% of the risk of stroke is from high blood pressure. High blood pressure damages the middle carotid artery that goes to your brain and does damage there. I'll show you that here in a second. The risk of some forms of dementia go up 50%. Dementia, 50% of those who have ever had any form of a stroke, whether it's a mini stroke or a larger stroke. And we all know, and I think we've all in this room have seen people who have had a major stroke. They're typically paralyzed from the left side of their body. They walk with a cane. They slur their words. Their face droops. I know a guy at my gym who comes almost every day to work out. He had a stroke 20 years ago. And his life hasn't changed much at all. Same level of, using a cane, of paralysis, of this thing with his face. It's horrible. We can protect ourselves from stroke in the same way I'm talking about everything else. This is what a stroke looks like. It's really a heart attack of the brain. If you can't understand what a stroke is, it's a heart attack of the brain. The middle carotid artery right here gets blocked from a buildup of plaque. And if you have the symptoms of a stroke, they say if you get to the hospital right away, you can save much of what happens to your brain. But if you don't, well, you're either going to die or you're going to have a paralysis. It blocks that middle artery, prevents blood from going to the brain. Now, there's also a hemorrhagic stroke. This one's interesting because this is where the blood vessel gets weak. Remember I was talking about how blood vessels get damaged by high blood pressure? As you damage this artery in the brain, this brain gets weak and then can break and cause blood flow on the brain, thereby creating pressure on the brain and damaging the blood will damage the vessels in the brain as well. So another really risky disease that we get in America that oftentimes can kill us. Okay, and then there's heart disease. This is the big one in America. 600,000 people a year die from heart disease. I think we all are pretty familiar with heart disease, and probably in this room, typically Americans are. It's the one that's always talked about because it is a big one. But let's take a look at it anyway. It also is the #1 killer for women. We don't think about that very often. I know that in terms of cancer, we think about prostate cancer for men, but that's the biggest killer. It's not. It's heart disease, and for women, breast cancer. This is the biggest killer for women. Excess means too much saturated fat and cholesterol. This is another disease of excess. We don't need any cholesterol in our bodies. You realize that we make every bit of cholesterol that we need? We don't need to take in excess cholesterol. And saturated fat, again, is connected to all kinds of ailments in our society. Judy asked me about triglycerides. Well, when you eat too much saturated fat, it gets converted to triglycerides and lipids, and that's what creates lipoproteins. That's where lipoproteins come from. Does anybody in the room know what LDLs are? Is that the good cholesterol or the bad cholesterol? LDLs. Bad ones. LDLs are the bad ones, and HDLs are the good ones. If you have a lot of bad ones in your system, you're in trouble. If you have a lot of good ones in your system, you're way better off. And I'm going to give you Higgins vision here in a second. But cholesterol over 200 milligrams 200 milligrams per deciliter doubles your risk of fatal heart attack. In America, we say 200 is the number. But if you're at 190, you're still at risk. You really need to get that number down to below 170 to really reduce your risk of heart attack. If you're above that level, then they say you're a walking heart attack. And that's pretty serious. Okay, let me give you Higgins vision, if I can, around what cholesterol is and how it affects your body. I want you to think of your blood vessels as giant train tracks. And on those tracks run a train, and one of them carries LDLs. LDLs are the bad ones. And that train runs throughout your vessels, and it drops off cholesterol to parts of your vessels, or your blood vessels, where you have inflammation typically. It'll build up there. So the LDL train goes and drops cholesterol off and clogs your arteries. Now, the LDL train is different. It goes around, like you see in the picture, and it picks up the cholesterol, and it takes it back to your liver and excretes it from the body. Good news, right? The higher the ratio of HDLs to LDLs, the healthier you're going to be in terms of heart disease. The lower your risk becomes if you change that equation. This goes on, like I said, these other diseases, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And if you don't protect yourself, every single moment in your life, you're building plaque probably in your arteries, unless you've done what few Americans do, where you reverse that trend and you have more HDL as a ratio to LDLs. Okay, a critical factor in health in America in terms of heart disease. This is the #1 killer, and this is something that we need to think about in terms of prevention as we think about our health in the longer term. Okay. Center Disease Control. We estimate that heredity accounts for 30% of deaths due to heart disease. Now, I have friends of mine that say, well, you know, I'm going to die anyway. My father died at 40, and my mother died at 50, and my brother died at, 20, whatever the numbers are. And they say, my friends tell me, I'm going to live my life. What the heck? I'm going to die anyway. But we find that heredity only counts for 30%, so you can affect 70% of your life. You can. It's your heredity to some degree, but 70%, would you take that chance? I think we all would. And that's the impact of heredity on heart disease. Okay, so a new study. This is, again, research I've seen before, but this came out just recently. It suggests that people who eat up to 7 servings of fruits and vegetables a day can cut their risk of premature death by 42%. We find that vegetables may be more important for your health than fruit. We know today that there are all kinds of compounds in vegetables that protect yourself from all of these diseases, not just heart disease. But resveratrol, for example, is one that will actually reduce the amount of cholesterol in your linings. Olive oil will raise HDLs in your system. So there are things that you can do. Exercise is a good example where it also raises HDLs that you can lower your risk of heart disease, which is the #1 killer in America. Okay. So I've learned in doing this kind of work that audiences today, they don't want entertainment anymore. They want action items. They want content. They want to know what they can do, which I think is important. So let me tell you the 5 things that you can do to protect your health. And you're the only one that can make this happen. I mean, the doctor can give you a pill and can do surgery, but if you want to protect your health and prevent homicide from happening, this is what you can do. Number 1, reduce the amount of salt you take. I have talked to a lot of people over the years, and if you reduce your risk of, if you reduce the amount of salt that you get, eventually you learn to get taste at that level. And I know people like myself where I cut back salt, and then I eat too much salt, and I nearly gag on it. It tastes so horrible. It's easy to do, and we've done that. I know that there are many people in the room who have been through that and have made those kind of changes. You reduce your risk of high blood pressure, and you reduce your risk of stroke when you reduce the amount of salt in your diet. This is a significant change. We say 1,500 to 2,000 milligrams a day. Today we get 4,200 milligrams of sodium. We get double what we need. And you can actually live on much less than 1,500. I probably live on less than 800. So you can get it down to that level. Okay, sugar. Reduce sugar to 5% of calories, and let me do the math for you. We normally get about a 2,000 a day calorie diet in this country. That's 100 calories a day. You can see it on the labels of food that you look at. You can see how much sugar is on the labels. Try to stay within that level of 100, and you can do it. Reduce liquid sugar immediately. If you're drinking anything that has sugar in it, and it's liquid, I would say that the first thing you should do is get rid of that. That's probably the #1 thing you can do that I'm going to tell you today that really will change your risk of disease. That actually raises the risk of 43% consuming too much liquid sugar. Okay, saturated fat and cholesterol. Reduce the amount of saturated fats you get. And reduce cholesterol. You don't need any cholesterol, actually, in your diet. You make all that you need. And the more cholesterol that you get, the more LDLs you create, the more lipids and triglycerides you create. And that's what creates the chain of LDLs that flow through your body and clog your arteries. Diets high in fat and cholesterol raise the risk of heart disease by 70%. Would you stand in line to win a lottery ticket for $100 million? Yeah, you would for sure. And would you stand in line to reduce your risk of heart disease by 70% for these multi-million-dollar bodies we have? Exercise. Now, this is interesting. Every website, no matter which one you go to, says that exercise is sort of the panacea for health in America. Every website suggests you get more exercise. When I put that ladder of success out there, the one thing I'm talking about is the amount of exercise we get in this country. If you just did that and you did nothing else, you would reduce your risk significantly. Now, let me tell you that it doesn't have to be running 6 miles a day. It doesn't have to be running at all. The most current research says if you walk for 30 minutes a day, and it doesn't have to be continuous, so you don't have to connect 30 minutes at some point during your day. You can park your car at the end of the parking lot every morning and walk into the office and walk back for lunch and walk back in again. Every time you move your body, every time you raise your arm, you burn a calorie. When I was still working before I retired from Whirlpool, when I was on the phone on conference calls, and I have my old boss in here that probably didn't know this, but I'd walk around my house as I would talk on the phone. I would move my body. I wouldn't sit at my desk. You can do that at your house. You can do that in your office. You can stand up. Instead of having meetings sitting down, you can have meetings standing up. You can walk up a flight of stairs and down a flight of stairs rather than taking the elevator. 30 minutes is not that hard to get in the course of a day. This will change the course of your life. And every website suggests it. Diabetes, heart disease, cancer, stroke. Doesn't matter. Get more exercise. It's the one thing that changes you, can change you for life. And then plant-based foods. In Dr. Buettner's look around the world, every society in the world that lived the longest ate the most plants. Now, I'm not saying that you have to change your diet. Just introduce more plants into your diet. That's not that hard to do. Kale, broccoli, cabbage, these are things that can protect you from heart disease and cancer and diabetes and stroke. Put more in your diet. Make it a broader part of your plate. I quite often went to dinner at these kinds of events with my staff and with dealers, and we'd go out and people would have a piece of steak, for example, and nothing else. Have a salad with it. Ask for a side of vegetables with it. That'll help you reduce your risk of disease. Increase your intakes of vegetables, fruits, grains, beans, and nuts. Nuts are associated with a 28% lower risk of diabetes, for example. Add nuts to your diet. Plant foods are low, and understand this is kind of interesting. Plant foods are low in sodium, sugar, they contain no saturated fat or cholesterol. So everything that's good for you are in plants, and nothing that's bad for you. They are high in fiber, and they offer protection from many forms of diseases, and that's from the CDC. Okay, I saved cancer for last because it's the most complex of all the diseases. There's 100 different types of cancer, and you can't do justice in a meeting like this where I spend 15 minutes talking about cancer. But I'm going to tell you this before I introduce this video from a researcher from Harvard that is the latest, most cutting-edge research on cancer. And at some point, most of us in our lives are going to face the time when a doctor comes into a room and says, you have cancer. And what that does to you, you'll understand. But this video will give you some look at that and ways you can protect yourself. But let me tell you this about cancer. That a cancer cell it was already in your body, but it begins as one cell that doesn't follow any of the rules. It's a cell that says, I don't care about what you think. I'm going to double as much as I want and increase the space that I have. Other cells follow rules that say, hey, this is my space, I keep this space. But cancer cells don't do that. And they double every 100 days, roughly. I mean, this is just an average. There's different types of cancers that grow at different rates, but most of them double every 100 days. And so if you start out with one cancer cell, it's microscopic, you don't know you have it. At the end of a year, you have 4. And there's no way you can tell. It's so microscopic at that level, you have no idea. But from 8 to 10 years, now that grows to 1 billion cells. And now you have a problem. Because at 1 billion cells, when you begin to double that, it'll get to 1 trillion quite fast. When we get to that level, let's say that your liver, you go to the doctor and they find out that you have cancer in your liver, and your liver is halfway gone by cancer cells. You hear this diagnosis all the time. You have 90 days to live. The reason why you have 90 days to live is if half your liver is gone, they know in 90 days or somewhere from 0 to 90 days, it's going to take over your liver and you're going to die. And that's why that kind of diagnosis comes out. I know this is an ugly story, but this is what happens. I had a friend of mine that actually was a buyer for a big company in Southern California, and he got cancer. And he went to the doctor on a Thursday. They discovered he had cancer, and by Monday he was dead. This is all about prevention. You can't really, in many cases, you can't stop this from happening. It's about prevention. And this video from Dr. Lee, like I said, is the most cutting-edge research. And I've seen a lot of other work that's been done that reinforces now about 2 years of work that he's done on this. And I want you to see this. And people in the other session wanted to know where this came from. It's from a group called TED Talks. Does anybody listen to TED Talks in here? Okay. Fascinating. Great. You can Google TED Talks. You can Google Dr. William.